Immanuel Kant introduced one of the most influential ideas in modern ethics, the categorical imperative. In his work, Groundwork for the Metaphysics of Morals, Kant argues that morality is not dependent on subjective feelings or consequences, but on universal objective principles. These principles, he claims, are grounded in reason and must apply to all rational beings without exception. The categorical imperative is a moral law that demands certain actions simply because they are morally right, irrespective of any desired outcomes or personal inclinations. Kant contrasts it with the hypothetical imperative, which commands actions based on a desired end. For example, if you want to be healthy, then exercise. In contrast, the categorical imperative is unconditional. It tells you to act in a certain way regardless of any specific goal. This categorical imperative has three main formulations which are central to understanding his ethical theory. The first formulation of the categorical imperative states, act only according to that maxim whereby you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. This formulation emphasizes universality. A maxim, in Kant's terms, is a principle or rule that guides an action. When you act, you should ask yourself if you could consent to the principle behind your action being made a law that applies to everyone universally. If the action you intend could not be willed as a universal law, then it is morally wrong. For example, let's consider the act of lying. If everyone lied whenever it suited them, the very concept of truth would be undermined and truth would be impossible. Therefore, lying cannot be universalized, and Kant would say that it is morally impermissible. This highlights the absolute nature of the categorical imperative. If you cannot imagine a world where everyone does the same thing you are doing, then the action cannot be morally justified. The second formulation of the categorical imperative states, act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of another, always at the same time as an end and never merely as a means. This formulation is centered around the idea of respecting human dignity. He argues that every individual must be treated as an end in themselves, a person with inherent value and dignity, not merely as a tool to achieve some other goal. When you treat someone as a means to an end, you are exploiting them, using them for your own purposes rather than recognizing their intrinsic worth. For example, consider a scenario where someone agrees to help you with a task, but you deceive them into thinking that you will reciprocate in the future when you have no intention to do so. According to the second formulation, you are using them merely as a means to your own end, which violates their intrinsic worth as a person. Thus, this second formulation insists on moral respect for others as ends in themselves, not as instruments for achieving personal goals. The third formulation builds on the previous two and introduces the idea of a kingdom of ends. In this formulation, he argues that we should act in a way that would allow for a community of rational beings to coexist, all acting according to universal moral laws. This kingdom is a hypothetical moral community where each individual's actions are guided by the categorical imperative and everyone is treated as an end in themselves. This formulation emphasizes the coherence of moral laws across all individuals. Each person's moral actions should contribute to a broader ideal society of rational agents where the dignity of each individual is respected and upheld.